The school hallway fell silent the moment he walked in. His shirt was half torn, chalk dust clinging to his collar, and yet his eyes carried no anger. Just calm, piercing sadness. Behind him 3 trembling boys stood with downcast eyes, their faces pale as if they'd seen something far greater than fear, something that changed them. Moments earlier they'd mocked him, humiliated him, ripped his shirt in front of the class, but now they were on their knees begging for forgiveness. What could make bullies turn into the ones who cry? What kind of man could stand before humiliation with that kind of grace? This is the story of Mr. Ethan Blake, the teacher no one expected, and the man who taught an entire school what strength really means. The first day at Rosewood High was buzzing with excitement and gossip. A new English teacher was coming, and for a school where students often ruled the halls more than the teachers did, it was like announcing a new victim to the lions. Mr. Ethan Blake, a man in his early 30s with neatly combed dark hair and soft brown eyes, walked into the campus carrying a worn-out leather bag. His clothes were simple, a faded blue shirt and black trousers that had seen better days. He didn't look intimidating. In fact, he looked like the kind of man people might overlook in a crowd. The moment he stepped into Class 10B, whispers filled the air. "Who's this guy? He looks like he's scared already. Bet he won't last a week." At the back of the room sat 3 boys, Ryan, the self-proclaimed leader, Jake, the muscle, and Connor, the joker. They'd made a game out of driving new teachers away. They'd broken one's glasses last year, made another cry, and proudly declared themselves the kings of 10B. Mr. Blake stood by the blackboard, smiling faintly. "Good morning, everyone," he said softly. "I'm Mr. Blake, your new English teacher." "Good morning, sir," half the class replied. The rest stayed silent, eyes glinting with mischief. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Hey, Teach, did you just come from a thrift shop?" Laughter rippled through the room. Mr. Blake didn't flinch. "Maybe I did," he said calmly, "but thrift shops are full of stories, just like books. That's where I find beauty." The laughter died down a little. That wasn't the reaction they expected. Usually teachers snapped or threatened detention, but Mr. Blake's calm unnerved them. He began his lesson, writing words from a poem on the board, "Still I Rise," by Maya Angelou. His voice carried a steady rhythm, gentle yet powerful. Some students listened, others pretended not to care. But even those who mocked him earlier found themselves strangely drawn in. Then, as the day went on, a plan began forming at the back of the room. Ryan whispered to Jake and Connor, "Let's see how calm he stays when we humiliate him." The next morning, they put their plan into motion. During roll call, as Mr. Blake bent to pick up some dropped papers, Jake accidentally spilled a bottle of water on his desk. Connor tossed chalk dust into the air, and Ryan tugged at Mr. Blake's shirt from behind, ripping it across the shoulder seam. The class gasped. Silence filled the room. Mr. Blake froze. The laughter began cruel and sharp. Ryan smirked. "What's wrong, Teach? Cack out your words." For a moment, it seemed like he might lose it. His hand gripped the torn fabric, his jaw tightened, but then he just smiled. A small, broken, but incredibly kind smile. He turned around, buttoned the remaining part of his shirt, and said softly, "It's okay. A torn shirt can be stitched, but words, they can tear much deeper." The laughter faded. The tone in his voice wasn't angry. It was heavy, tired, almost wounded. But instead of leaving, he continued teaching, his torn shirt visible, his dignity intact. After class, he quietly left without reporting them. That confused everyone even more. Later that day, whispers spread around the school that Mr. Blake hadn't gone to the principal. He just stayed silent. That night, while the bullies were hanging out behind the gym, they saw something that would start to change everything. Mr. Blake was sitting on a bench under a flickering light, feeding a small stray dog from his lunchbox. His shirt was still torn and his eyes looked distant, but when he saw the dog wagging its tail, he smiled again. Ryan froze, watching from a distance. There was something about that moment. A man who'd been humiliated, still sitting there quietly feeding a hungry creature, that hit him somewhere deep. But pride is a hard thing to break. The next day, Ryan made another joke. This time, though, his voice wavered slightly. Mr. Blake just looked at him with those calm, knowing eyes. "Ryan," he said, "you remind me of someone I used to know." "Yeah." "Ooh," Ryan shot back. "Myself." And for a few seconds, Ryan didn't have a comeback. A week later, Mr. Blake announced a class project, "Write about a moment that changed you." Groans filled the room, but he smiled. "Don't write it for marks," he said. "Write it for yourself." The next few days, students worked quietly, except for Ryan, Jake, and Connor. They hadn't written a thing. Then one afternoon, they followed Mr. Blake as he left school, laughing about how pathetic he looked. But their laughter died when they saw him stop in front of an old community shelter, a place for homeless children. They peeked through the window. Inside, Mr. Blake was sitting with a group of kids, reading stories aloud. His torn shirt was now sewn neatly, and every child around him listened like he was telling them the greatest tale in the world. Ryan's smirk disappeared. Jake muttered, "Is that our teacher?" Connor nodded slowly. They stayed and watched. For over an hour, Mr. Blake played games, helped them read, and gave away the food he'd brought for himself. When one of the children hugged him and called him Papa Ethan, Ryan's throat tightened. Later that night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He kept hearing that child's voice, and Mr. Blake's calm words echoing, "A torn shirt can be stitched, but words they can tear much deeper." The next morning, he came to class early. The other two bullies arrived too, unusually quiet. When Mr. Blake entered, they stood up. "Sir," Ryan said hesitantly, "about the other day, we're sorry." Mr. Blake looked surprised but said nothing. He just nodded, a faint smile forming. But the apology didn't feel enough to Ryan. During the presentation day, when it was his turn to read his essay, he took a deep breath and said, "This is called The Teacher with the Torn Shirt." The class leaned in. Ryan's voice cracked as he read. "I thought strength was about fear, about making people small so you could feel big. But then I met someone who didn't fight back, because he didn't need to. He taught me that kindness can break harder hearts than fists ever could." When he finished, the room was silent. Some students even teared up. Mr. Blake looked at him, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Ryan," he said softly. "You just passed the hardest lesson of all." From that day on, everything changed. Ryan, Jake, and Connor began helping with Mr. Blake's after-school reading club. They fixed classroom furniture, helped the janitor, and even protected younger students from being bullied. They weren't perfect, but they were different. Months later, when Mr. Blake had to leave for another teaching assignment, the entire class gathered to say goodbye. Ryan handed him a new shirt, neatly wrapped. This time, Ryan said with a shaky grin, "We hope you won't need to stitch it." Mr. Blake laughed softly. "Thank you, boys. But remember, it's never about the shirt. It's about what you choose to do when life tears something away from you." As he walked away down the hall, Ryan whispered, "We'll never forget you, sir." And they didn't. Because some lessons don't end with grades, they end with redemption. Kindness is not weakness. Real strength is the power to forgive, to stay gentle when the world is cruel, and to teach through love instead of revenge. Because sometimes, the most powerful lessons aren't written in books, they're written on hearts.